here. Welcome to the James Bond podcast, in which we're going to talk about all the James Bond movies in production order. We'll also discuss non-canon, non-Aeon productions, including Casino Royale, Operation Kid Brother, and Never Say Never Again. I'm Bronwyn Knox, here with David B. Anderson and David Lawler. This week, we'll be discussing Dr. No from 1962.
Wait, what? I'm sorry, what?
And Dr. Doe, yes.
And
Mr. Do.
We'll be discussing Dr. No from 1962. So, David and David, how are you tonight?
I'm fine. How are you, honey? David Anderson, how are you?
I'm great.
All right.
Coming at you.
Okay, so...
Now we're in a black spot now.
Yeah.
We're in a dark spot.
Is it too much? Okay, so the first thing that we're supposed to talk about here is, like, why? Why James Bond? Why are we doing this?
Yeah, why are we doing...
Why?
I can tell you where the genesis of it was. Well,
Genesis?
the whole thing was I think it came from the fact that Epix was showing all the James Bond movies because they have all the James Bond movies, and they happened to be free during the the whole lockdown. They were like, "Oh, we're so wonderful. We're such a great cable company. We're offering our service for free for all of you people trapped inside because of COVID, but we're turning it off, and you'll have to pass once we turn it off." They come down on you really hard, and then they disappeared. But I managed to grab a bunch of James Bond titles, and I was like, "Oh, this is very interesting." It would be interesting to do a podcast because that's me all the time. I'm like, I find a knitting circle or a bunch of kittens playing pool. I'm going to be like, hey, let's do a podcast.
Anything on your end, David Anderson? Why do you want to do this?
Actually, I want to take total credit for this because I've been bugging him to do this for a couple of years.
There is that, too. We did talk about
There's that, too, yeah.
All right.
So I figured, this would be a fun thing to do. It seems that James Bond continued. It remained. It went on long after.
It evolves, it grows.
Yeah.
All right, so first things first, let's talk about the actual movie.
Actually.
The actual movie. What is it actually?
It's called Dr. No, not spelled out. It's initialized.
What is it actually all about?
About a guy who doesn't like to say yes. This is Dr. No. Can you? Who's the guy who plays him? Can you check that really quickly?
Dr. No himself?
Jeffrey Wiseman.
Wow, he's like doesn't even need.
I forgot he's a total Bond nerd. He's like,
Yeah, you're gonna try to hit me with trivia. You're gonna lose.
Right.
Yeah, right. We don't even see him until the last 20 minutes of the movie, which is very interesting. The whole thing is the way I see it. Dr. No is just a simple, basic movie. It's not even the James Bond movie that you would be accustomed to. It does not have the beats in place yet. It's just it's just sort of, hey, we're making a movie here. What do you think of this? Ian Fleming's books were very popular, right?
Yes.
At least as far as I know. And they were big sellers. I mean, they weren't bestsellers like the way we have bestsellers these days. But they
weren't. For some reason, there was a hype that started because John Kennedy read it and it was on his top 10 list.
That's right, John Kennedy. John Kennedy was a big fan of
the books, and then they got really popular, and then these two producers that are we going to go into the history of
we're going to have
the rights and who had the rights and when?
Well, we're going to have to, because this is the first step, we're going to have introductions of people like Cubby Broccoli and Sean Connery and who's the other Harry
Saltzman.
Harry Saltzman, and then there was also
Kevin McClory.
Kevin McClory, there you go. Right, and we're going to have to go into all that. The one thing I can tell you from the beginning is that they never really intended for Sean Connery to play the part. They intended for Roger Moore. Roger Moore was always the popular favorite, but he had just signed a deal to do the Saint. First, the movie, right? Now, the movie is basically, where do we start? We start
with the gun barrel. We start with the gun barrel.
We have the gun barrel, yeah, the man with the hat and everything.
Who is not Sean Connery. I mean, I don't know if you can see it on your big screen TV. That is not Sean Connery. It's a stuntman. For the first three, it's a stuntman. And actually, I want to say something that goes to the end of the movie. There's this kind of big, somewhat sort of dangerous thing that happens. And there's no stuntman. It's Sean Connery and Ursula Andress, and they do something. And I'm like, there's no stuntman. It's one shot.
It's actually them. The actors?
It's actually them. I rewound it. I'm like, that's them when they're jumping off of
They must have not really had they didn't not care as much, for the actors' well-being. Especially, the way I know the British film industry works, they're like stunt doubles. What? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, actors are actors, and we pay them a flat fee.
And also, I want to say, this movie is like when you think of a British movie at that time, this is early 60s, you think either like Lavender Hill Mob, or you think like sort of dark, moody, like spy thrillers, if you're thinking of Spy Who Came In From the Cold or something like that. That's what you think of. So when this comes out, it's like this big
Lavender
bright.
Hill, is that the one with Alec Guinness?
That's Alec Guinness.
Right,
yes.
right. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about, well, the familiar Bond opening gives way to calypso music and animated dancing, and then it transitions to Three Silhouetted Men, and then you hear the song Three Blind Mice, which is so bizarre to hear, especially the way we started this whole thing. We kind of like were running like unevenly through the series. And then we got the box set, courtesy of John Fralick. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. And we're getting into like this high stakes techno stuff that's going on with all this action, and it's stuff you're very used to watching these days in movies, right? So we go back, we pop in Dr. No, because I haven't seen it in years, and it's like the silliest thing to see how this whole thing began.
It's I like the Three Blind Mice. It's a very Jamaican version of Three Blind Mice, and
right.
then they show the three guys shuffling along.
And they're not blind.
And they're not so blind mice.
They are not blind, no.
No, they're armed, though.
They're armed.
Well, preferably if they're armed, I'd rather them not be blind, maybe. But.
Well, it's very dangerous, yeah. And then we get like a kind of M/6 installation inside there, and this woman gets killed. They kill a woman, which is so interesting to me, because you didn't. This was like...
Well, they killed the guy first. They killed the guy first.
They killed the guy.
Strangway.
Yeah. Strangways, yeah.
Strangway, which I just like to say. I keep wanting to call him Strangeways, and I know
maybe that's
that is not named.
Well, I mean, we can get into James Bond weird names, Smith, Smith, and
yeah,
that's a beautiful kill. But yeah,
but it was an unwritten rule back then that women were not supposed to die in movies or be murdered. Especially pretty horribly. There's a lot. This movie is a very cold touch. It's not very warm. There is a lot of killing in this movie.
Yeah, and although I also want to say special shout out to like these transfers on the Blu-rays. It's so crisp and so sharp, and they could even do better today. Like, because these are masters from like the mid 2000 HD. Like, they could probably clean that up even more today. And
they probably could. They look really good. But
super crisp.
We'll get into the techno. I had a couple of technical foibles, but we'll save that until the end. And then we introduce James Bond. He's gambling, and he's hooking up with this brunette who becomes his girlfriend in the second movie, right?
Well, for side piece.
That's how I describe it.
And it was going to be.
I tend to think of her as a girlfriend because it's
well, she probably thought so.
For him, by his standards, this is a monogamous relationship that he's having with this woman, even though we only see her in 2 movies.
He sees her more than once. To him, I guess, yeah.
If you see somebody more than once, and you're in James Bond's world, you're a girlfriend. If you have underpants in his drawer in his apartment, you're a girlfriend. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So remember, she kind of stalks him. Like he gives her information of like.
Yeah, she just shows up.
She shows up. She's wearing one of his shirts. She's all sexy and everything.
And I gotta say, like, okay, so he's first introduced. He does the James Bond. This is like he's coming off of like a couple of small parts. His Darby O'Gill and the Little People. He comes in. He's like total.
I forgot he was in that movie.
He's total pimp. He's got it. That's why they hired him.
Oh, I did want to. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about Terrence Young. I did a little bit of research on him. He's the director of the movie. Mm-hmm. Sean Terrence Young, as they say. And he directed 3 of the Bond films. He directed Dr. No from Russian with Love, the second one, and then Thunderball. And then he did a couple more movies. His big hit was probably Wait Until Dark with Audrey Hepburn. And he also did Red Sun, which was a very interesting one, and the Valachi Papers. He worked a couple of movies, maybe 3 movies of Charles Bronson. But he did this movie called Red Sun that also had Ursula Andress in it, and it had this international cast. It also had Toshiro Mifune and a bunch of people, and John Landis tells a story because he worked on Red Sun. It was one of his movies that he worked on when he was a production assistant. And they brought him in, and they put pigtails on him, and he pretended to be a Mexican bandito in the movie. John Landis we're talking about. And nobody knew English except for Charles Bronson, and maybe Ursula Andress knew a little bit of English. So basically, he said, because these movies were shot without a microphone, and then the dialogue was re-recorded in post later, the director would just point at the actor and they would say their line. So it was like point, say your line, point, say your line, point, say your line. Nobody knew anything about what the script was about. So that's how they did, because that was like a spaghetti western kind of a thing.
So does anybody want to just sort of gun through the plot, or how much of the plot we're going to give, so we can?
Why don't you?
Instead of going,
give us the.
I mean, the tangents are interesting, but. Sorry to be. Give us okay. Well,
You know, you're a
Dave-
real ball buster.
I know
Did you know
I
that
am.
as a
I'm
director?
sorry. Isn't that what you told me to do?
Jesus.
So no, David Anderson probably knows the plot better than me, but so
Yes.
yes, exactly. Yeah, he gets to, this is our first shot at seeing M16, and M gives him the assignment to go find out what happened to Strangways and his secretary, and then Bond goes to Jamaica.
It's actually no. I want to correct you. I want to get super. Actually,
Okay, go ahead, please.
first of all, it would be MI6.
MI6, right?
Not M16.
Right,
That's
right.
a gu-
That'd
that's
be a
M16.
gun. I did say M16. I don't know why I said that.
And also,
Thanks.
if you see, I think he says MI6, but they dub on MI7 to have it like not be he's an MI7, and
okay.
so he's actually like because like they're special. You know, they don't want maybe they don't want to be associated. Now later movies it would be MI6, but
Wait, why would they change it like that?
I don't know. Maybe they didn't want it to be like officially sanctioned or something.
You
But
mean there's an actual MI6 out there somewhere?
there is an MI6.
They really call it that too?
I think so.
Jeez,
Or maybe there's an MI.
Much.
Maybe there's an MI. I know there's an MI5 or something because like there was a show called MI5. I remember that. Not to be confused with Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
I'll have to look that up. We're Americans. We don't know nothing about what goes on over there. But yeah, I want to. Okay, so I'm sorry. I'll let you finish. Sorry. Can I finish? Sorry.
Oh, he does this gag. He keeps doing this gag throughout the early movies where he throws his hat and it lands on the coat rack. That and all the way up to Lazenby. Lazenby does it too.
Roger Moore does it a couple of
Does
times.
he?
Or
I can't even imagine
he walks in and just puts his hat on, or
Really? I
like,
mean, like Roger Moore? I never knew Roger Moore to wear the hat. Did he?
a couple of times.
I mean, like Connery kind of rarely wore the hat, and I don't know, maybe they wanted the hat there for Lazenby, but I don't remember Moore actually using a hat. Did he?
Well, I don't think. Well, I think he like maybe the first couple when people used to wear hats, like in the 70s.
Because
Maybe.
I think that might have been a mandate of Moore. He might have been, yes, I'll be James Bond, but I'm not wearing the hat.
Don't muss the hair.
No, he has beautiful hair. You won't want to.
Yes.
That's my Roger Moore. What do you think?
Well,
We'll
yeah.
be getting into the Connery impersonations too, and also we'll be doing
Right.
George Lazenby, who talks like this. This
Yeah,
didn't
let-
happen to the other fella.
let
It's
the
gonna be
woman
fun.
speak.
Let's have some fun, shall we? Huh? Let's have some fun.
Let the
Come on,
woman
director.
speak. Hashtag me too.
Oh, I wanted to mention Q because you talked about The Office. Oh.
He's not in this movie. What
No,
do you
what
want
we
to
do have a Q. There is a
Oh,
Q
there is,
type
okay.
though, but it's not Desmond
But you
Llewellyn.
tight, yes.
He gives him his
Gives him his
gadgets.
gun.
Oh, he gets the gun. Yes, this is the gun. This is
Yes.
this is like I mean like Connery's like I want to use my trusty Beretta. I don't want to use a Walther. And I wrote here in my notes research the Walther PPK, and I guess I didn't catch it, and I didn't do any research. I'm sorry.
What just happened? Okay.
That's okay. I'm a research engine. It's actually it's an Israeli gun, I think.
I thought it
You
was
did the
German.
research?
Wasn't it German?
I thought it was some sort of special Israeli gun.
Maybe it's a gun
could
the
be-
Germans design that the Israelis use.
Yeah, could be.
Okay.
Yeah, what I liked about that scene is that he makes him give up whatever it was he was carrying. He's
The
like,
Beretta.
no, you have to take this one. Yeah.
So I like my
And he
Beretta.
tries to sneak it out.
Yeah.
He tries to sneak it out, leaves it with Moneypenny. I forgot to mention Moneypenny's approach to Bond is something along the lines of what we consider sexual harassment these days. But Connery is a different kind of man. As much as we watch these movies for the female eye candy on display, Connery's Bond is also eye candy. He's very much so.
Yeah, I want to know what the wife's opinion of this man is. This handsome man at the time when he had his hair.
Okay, sure. Well, yeah, he's a really good-looking guy. I mean,
Well, yeah.
he's nicely
But-
built. He's got.
He has a
he's got
very
everything.
Charisma? Are we talking like is there an animal magnetism? Does it do anything for you? Because I know you're kind of more of a Dalton, kind of brooding,
Yeah, that's true.
pissed off guy.
Like, he's not yeah, he's not my favorite. He's not the sexiest to me, but I get it. He's nice looking and he's sort of charming and all that stuff.
has
My
a-
mom had a huge crush on him.
Yeah, I know. It's a generational thing. One
Could
thing
be,
I can
yeah.
say about Connery, he has a very sensual mouth. He has a very interesting sensual mouth. Have you ever noticed this, David?
Can't say I have. Is there something you want to tell
Connor
us?
does this thing, and it's sort of the way he talks, and he's got his
Well,
lips
also,
out,
if you
know.
notice when he goes and sees Moneypenny, they almost play it like she's really giving him a huge vibe, and it's like if a woman's giving you a huge vibe, you can play with that. It wasn't like with the Roger Moore, it was kind of creepy.
You thought Moore was creepy? Because I think
I thought,
Connery's
well, Moore was creepy. I mean, look, did you ever see like Moore like try to kiss anybody? He always looks like he's trying to suck their face off. He doesn't quite.
I've never seen that. I will tell you that Brosnan looks like he's trying to eat a young lady's face every time he kisses
Oh,
her.
he starts biting. He starts
He's a
chewing.
biter.
He's a biter.
All right, we
I'm
haven't.
sure a lot
we
of
haven't.
women love.
Go ahead.
A lot of women would love to have him bite them.
I'm
so,
sure
you
all
know.
of them,
I don't doubt it.
every Bond has his certain appeal. You know, it's kind of like Coke or Pepsi. You know,
All right.
or are we?
Well, can we get to Jamaica? Have we
Let's
gotten to
come
Jamaica
back
yet?
to Jamaica. You
Well,
were
first,
telling
okay,
me-
but first he meets like he's like this is where I'm like, dude, it's like, how do you do this? Because look, I am a man of advanced age. I can't be like partying all night. I can't be at the casino all night. Go visit, M at like 3 a.m. He gets out like 3:30. He's home by 4. He has to be out in like 2 hours to be at the airport. He hasn't slept. He's been doing stuff all day, and then this woman comes in and he's got to do her.
Yeah.
And who knows what happens there? Maybe he's like a 2-pump Johnny. I don't know.
I really like his apartment. It's a really awesome apartment. I like it.
Yeah, it's one of the few times you actually see his apartment. I don't think you see his apartment again until Live and Let Die, and then in Skyfall, where it's like literally just a couch and a TV, which is kind of what James Bond should have.
Well, it's still a lot of space. Lots of space, you know?
Yes.
Jack Nicholson would
He
be
opens up
impressed.
the room, but it's like he's like, and then he goes right to the airport and he's all fresh, and I'm like, damn, that's a real man right there.
Maybe he
Yeah,
takes
they're
cat
tough.
naps or something, you know?
They were
Maybe
tougher back then.
He's a light sleeper. He takes cat naps, you know?
Sleep on the plane like Indiana Jones.
We get out to Jamaica and he hooks up with his CIA contact, who does not immediately address himself, Felix Leiter.
He didn't hook up with him. He just sort of like he observed him, but he didn't bother to say who he was.
And by the way, it's Jack Lord. And Jack Lord.
Yes.
Jack Lord is known for his starring role as Steve McGarrett in the CBS television program Hawaii Five-0, which ran from 1968 to 1980. According to William Shatner, in 1966, Gene Roddenberry offered Lord the role of Captain James T. Kirk on Star Trek to replace Jeffrey Hunter. But Hunter's wife was making too many demands, and Lord asked for 50% ownership of the show. So Roddenberry offered the role to Shatner.
Wow. And do you think?
And he's
this
the
is
only
movie
other good-looking guy in this whole movie. This movie is populated with nothing but incredibly gorgeous women and really butt-ugly men. That's one thing I want to
Well,
do.
yeah, that's what you do. You surround yourself with ugly people, you look better.
So he's in Jamaica. He goes to Strangway's house. He finds a picture of the boatman Quarrel, and then he.
Coral, who winds up being an ally. Later.
Yes.
Yeah. Coral works with Felix, right?
Right. So, yeah, he goes to meet Quarrel, but first Quarrel wants to beat him up until the CIA agent introduces himself and says, "Yeah, he's cool."
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's this really another drop-dead gorgeous woman just snapping photos of him and all that stuff when they're out partying. And they take her film away and all that stuff. The one thing I wanted to mention here is that the hallmark of Bond films is globe hopping, but we stay in Jamaica for the duration of this movie.
Because that was by design. They were real, because I'm going to get all like nerdy on you again. Their original plans can go into our Thunderball episode. Their original plan was to they were going to make James Bond the movie, basically, and that's how Thunderball was created initially.
It's so weird.
They
Thunderball
were
would
gonna
be the
write-
standard, you know, because
And it was gonna
Thunderball is
be-
not my favorite of those movies.
It isn't mine either. And it was going to be, and that's how Ian Fleming got involved. It was like, here, I'm going to help you co-write, and then Kevin McClory co-wrote, and then that became a thing. But then they realized this is going to be way too big and way too expensive. We only have $1 million to make this, and half of that's from United Artists, when United Artists was actually United Artists.
Yeah, these are, but all of these were all original stories and/or novels by Ian Fleming, right?
And this particular book is probably very close to the actual book. And of course, they would take titles and mess around with stuff, but I think this is very close to the actual book of what Dr. No was trying to do or something. And there's always some sort of like rocket. It does get kind of weird and Dr. Evil-ish kind of near the end, and the base and everything.
Right.
But when you think about like the amount of money that they had and what they do with it, and the Ken Adam like design, I'm like, I was thinking of this.
It's impressive on that level for Ken Adams' production design. My favorite Bond movies are always going to be the ones where the production design really blows me away, and that's why once we get down the line of these movies, you'll see how I'm impressed mainly with production design more than anything. And he does a really wonderful job. Even though this is kind of, they only spent $1 million basically on this.
You see that they put a ton of effort. Like, this was not half-assed at all. This was done. We're going to make the best movie we can with the money we have. It
really, yeah. There's a certain quality to this.
It's well lit.
Yeah.
Well shot. It's well made. This probably blew people away when it came out.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that's probably why it had such it did so well internationally too. These movies made more money internationally. We talked about this before, like much more money overseas.
They also kept getting re-released. That was when they used to, because this was before video. They just re-released them.
Well, they had you had an opportunity to have a money-making franchise this early, and this is before the big box office boom, which is why the movies wind up making so much money in the 70s. Once we get into, say, the mid 70s, these movies are making over $100 million. Which is huge. That's huge for the time. And this is before Star Wars. It's before Jaws,
Thunderball made $140 million, in its run, like, just in those kind of dollars. Like, that's literally over $1 billion today.
That's insane. That's an insane amount of money. And you just wonder where it all went, that United Artists would lose all that money. And
they had Rocky money, too.
Yeah.
So at Strangway's house, the other thing Bond finds was a receipt from Professor R.J. Dent, and then he goes to visit Dent at his office. Dent claims these rock samples, that's what the receipt was about, are ordinary rocks. But then we get away from James Bond's point of view to go follow Dent around, and Dent actually visits our title character.
Which one is Dent? Is he the really ugly dude? That really ugly dude?
He's the professor. I don't know if he's ugly.
Is he the guy who tries to kill himself or tries to kill Bond in the hotel room?
Yeah, I'm getting to that. So Dr. No orders Dent to kill James Bond.
We never see him either. We just see
using a spider. It's just
using
his voice. Spider.
The spider.
He's the one, right? So the professor, he drops the spider on James Bond.
Yes, this is the Tiki Idol scene from the Brady Bunch movie,
or
the Brady Bunch.
And not only that, what makes it great is that first of all, you can obviously tell that the spider's on some sort of glass, even though what is it? It's a tarantula, which are completely harmless.
Completely harmless. But Connery is sweating buckets.
Yeah, he doesn't enjoy it.
Yeah. So, and then when he hits it with his shoe, it's like the music goes with the ding.
Yeah. Musical stings accompany his smooching of the tarantula. It's almost funny, actually, the way it's kind of put together.
So failing killing him with the spider, the next thing that Dent tries is to get Miss, what is her name? Miss Taro.
Is that the fake Chinese?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's like, it's okay. This is a big point in the 60s, 70s, maybe even up to the early 80s. It was forbidden to cast Chinese people, so they would just get people that were either Asian, and you know how these things go, or you.
Are you sure she was playing an Asian? I thought she just had some interesting eye makeup on.
No.
So Zena Marshall, who plays Miss Taro, is actually a British actress who was born in Kenya.
Well, there you go. See?
Yeah.
She's not Chinese.
Anyway, so yeah, it's not really listed as the main part of the main plot description, but basically she sets him up to come over to his house for a quote tour, which basically means she's leading him to her apartment where he's supposed to get killed, but of course he dodges those people.
He does, and then he shows up later, and she's all shocked, like, "Why aren't you dead?" I mean, hi, honey.
Yeah.
Come on in.
And that's when it gets a little rapey for me. I'm like, it's getting
he grabs
a little.
her. He's like,
I suppose.
And then eventually she caves. Like that is always what happens. And if you just get grabby enough,
well, yeah, no one says
strong.
no.
They just like, which does not happen. Well,
she had other options. She could have been like, so let's go on that tour, but instead she just keeps him around by sleeping with him until I guess she thinks someone else is going to show up. Dent's supposed to show up and actually kill him.
So when do we get into the mystery of Crab Key?
Too.
Yeah, he fails.
But then he sort of like a guy shows up in a car and he just puts her in the car.
Yeah, and she spits
I was like,
on
hey,
him.
at least he didn't kill her. This wasn't a Roger Moore Bond where the woman just like sleeps with him and she's dead like 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
Right.
If it weren't the first movie, you would think it was refreshing, but it's not. It's actually just he's very brutal. I thought that Connery's Bond in this movie, particularly, and a little bit of From Russia with Love, is brutal. He goes and kills people. From Russia with Love there's some of the behavior is a little inexcusable, but here, I mean, like he's like just killing people who aren't even offering any kind of
That's
real
his job.
But
right, yeah, he's got a license for that.
But if you look at the later movies, maybe starting with Goldfinger on, he doesn't really pull the trigger until he is actually completely in danger. Sometimes he isn't in danger and he's just killing these people. That's how I saw it. He seems really brutal. He's very cold.
I don't know. Dent tried to kill him twice, so I'm not going to be weeping any bitter tears for him.
But Dent, isn't he a professor? He's a scientist. What the hell does
well,
he know about, being a hitman,
Clearly not much.
Oh my, I have a gun. Am I supposed to, I can tell you how the gun works, but you want me to shoot him.
Yeah,
I understand.
He failed miserably. Yeah, so Bond discovers these rocks are radioactive, and that's when he gets Quarrel in the boat to take them to Crab Key.
Fine, and this is where the movie kicks into gear.
Yeah, and then we finally meet
We finally meet
The
what's her
Bond
name?
girl.
Her full name is Honeychild Ryder.
Oh, really?
Played by Ursula Andress, gorgeous woman, statuesque. She's wearing a swimsuit. She's not even okay.
Not just a swimsuit. This is a famous white bikini. This is iconic.
It's iconic. She's got a knife. She goes diving for chum or God knows what else. It's seashells and sells. She sells down by the seashore.
Yeah.
And this is what we were talking about because we said she doesn't really figure into the plot, but she does have some.
She's completely random. She has nothing to do with the plot. She's nobody's mistress. She's not a hit person. She's just there, and he meets her.
Doesn't she tell a horrible story involving Dr. No?
Nothing to do with Dr. As far as I can tell, it didn't have anything to Dr. No, but I'm sure David Anderson will correct me. But she tells this horrible story about she was traveling around with her parents dies, and then there's some landlord who rapes her, and she drops something on him. She kills him with a poison insect or a spider, and she talks about how it took him like 2 or 3 days to die. And what was the point of the story?
But wasn't that Dr. No?
The reason she's there is
Did
because her dad died or something.
Right.
Like her dad was the one that like took her there or something, and that's where they were looking.
She's kind of like the original creepy girl. She's very, she's very dark.
No, it's just you would expect if they stopped to tell a story like that in the movie that it would have a payoff later, and it doesn't. So it's just like,
Well, eventually in the boat, because all my movies end this way, baby.
Yeah. Okay.
In the boat.
Hey, Austin Powers. Oh, Austin Powers wanted to make that connection first. Dr. No's obvious hazmat suit that he's wearing was ripped off by Dr. Evil in the first Austin Powers.
Oh, yeah.
Except his didn't fit. He kept trying to push it down because it kept going over his head, which was funny. But yeah, they're in Crab Key. It's a lot of fun with him and Quirrell. Oh, they talk about dragons, and of course, this is just like what?
Yeah. So
Come on, there are no dragons.
And he gets killed by that thing, and
it's just a truck. It's just a truck with painted teeth on it that spits fire.
It says in here that the flamethrower equipped tank is this thing they're calling the dragon. Yeah. So at nighttime they run into the so-called dragon, and that's the end of poor Quirrell.
They even paint a face on it to scare people because they know it'll scare people. Though
but I can't believe that you can look at that thing and go, "Oh my God, it's a dragon! It's trying to kill us."
Well,
it's
strange.
It's one of our gods. It's trying to hurt us.
They're the common clay,
Right.
Sons of the soil,
So Quirrell dies, and Bond and Honey get picked up by Dr. No's men who
they put them
hose them down.
It's a really cool scene too. They make them strip. They're like, you're covered in radiation. This whole island is radioactive, so they have to go through this whole process of getting washed up and clean, given nice bathrobes and togs and everything. Although they didn't give Ursula like a robe that would fit her. They just gave her like a knockoff of Connery's robe because it's like draped all over her. It's not really form-fitting or anything.
Okay.
Then, this bugs me because this is just like The Prisoner or something like that, or these old spy shows where they go through all this trouble of washing them up, cleaning, and then they give them room service and drug their coffee.
Yeah, they put him in a nice room, give him some clothes, and give him some coffee.
How about we cut a few
pass out.
We cut a few details out of that. We start by drugging them with the coffee or whatever they want, and then putting them to bed and washing them up and all that stuff.
Well, remember when he finally gets them to dinner, he basically he's almost trying to like bring them over to his side, or at least Bond. He's trying to say, you might even have a place in our organization, and then he talks about Spectre and
Spectre. We get Spectre. The first reference to Spectre, which is
They wake up from the drugged coffee. They go to dinner with Dr. No, and then, as he says,
and Dr. No, I kept confusing the actor with Lawrence Harvey because he reminded me of the British actor Lawrence Harvey, who was in a bunch of movies, namely The Manchurian Candidate, stuff like that. But he's a little too small and scrawny, actually. Lawrence Harvey's kind of a built dude. But this guy, they've put spirit gum on his face to make him look Chinese. It's a little bit awkward.
You can see you can see the makeup. It's like everything's HD now. You can really see.
Definitely. Especially what was the one that Connery did where they made him up to look Asian?
That'd be You Only Live Twice.
You Only Live Twice, right? And
but look,
give him
the eye makeup was the least of the problems with him being hairy and being like 6'2".
And he's like
head taller
completely built and everything.
So. Dr. No also has prosthetic metal hands. Did we mention that?
That's
he said it was an accident. Something happened or something.
Radiation
I guess.
I think he had a hot date with an alligator is what happened.
No, it's
was his name Kananga?
Kananga. What was Dr. No's plan? I can't refer to my notes yet. David, do you know?
It was
something about capturing missiles.
Yeah, something like that.
Disrupt the Project Mercury launch from Cape Canaveral.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. That'll do
it. Messing with the Americans is what's happening.
This guy,
because that was part of the
Spectre. No good. This guy.
Yes.
Spectres. Their plan is to mess with us.
Right.
Okay, can you tell us, because I didn't write it down, what the what Spectre stands for? Is it in there?
Go
Special
ahead.
Executive for counterterrorism and extortion. I think that's what it is.
Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, and Extortion.
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense. Like,
You know,
the
okay.
acronym is kind of fucked up. Yeah.
In the in between time, I forgot to mention that me and Browen have started watching the the Marvel comic book extended universe movies. We started with Iron Man, and Agent Coulson comes up, and he keeps trying to rattle off the what SHIELD stands for. It eventually becomes SHIELD because I'm like, oh, SHIELD, I get it. But it was like this ridiculous acronym.
Yeah.
It was like Secretaries of Homeland something, Intelligence something, Division. And it all comes out. I'm like, you know, and they keep making a running joke throughout Iron Man. They're like, you got to shorten that. You got to come up with another name because that just sounds ridiculous. Until he says SHIELD. And I'm like, oh, okay, SHIELD.
So after dinner, they take everyone away. They lock up Bond someplace and they lock up Honey someplace else.
They put Bond in a very easily escapable situation, I would say. Basically, they put him in a room, and he has to throw it. He throws a shoe up at the grate, which then gives off an electrical charge, and then burns out. So he gets out, climbs through. He does a little Die Hard there through the vent, gets in there, sneaks in, steals a hazmat suit, beats up.
Well, now
people.
wait a minute. I want to say something. This like dawned on me as it was happening. I was like, okay, he's going through. And then there's a little rush of water through there. Isn't that like radioactive water going through that?
I was thinking that water had to be hot, and that there's
he
way.
does put a thing on his. You know, he puts I think the water is supposed to cool the reactor or whatever. And
Maybe.
I gotta say, when he gets there is literally like a knob that says, "Turn it this way, safe. Turn it this way, dangerous." Why make the knob go all the way to dangerous? If
that's like the history eraser button.
Like,
it's like, don't touch the history eraser button.
Yeah, do you really need that setting? Yeah, that's the point where I sort of space out. What is the rest of the things that happen?
He
in
just
the movie?
he sabotages whatever their plan was.
Yeah, and then Dr. No, they have like a fist fight sort of thing, and then they fight him, and he's got his like claw hands, and he can't get up, and then it like scrapes down, and then he goes down into I guess like the hot water, the radioactive water.
Yeah, I guess he goes into the radioactive. We never see him die though. We never see him die. We see him get submerged underneath, but we never.
Well, he's never popped up in any other movie. So
I gotta assume he died.
He doesn't.
Well, also, he gets down there, and then the thing blows up, and then that gets to what I was saying before about like there's this shot. They're on the dock, and then they get down into that boat. It starts with Sean Connery and Ursula Andress because I looked again. I'm like, that's them, and then they run all the way down that thing. Then they climb down a thing. Then they get into the boat. He punches the guy. It's all one shot.
Wait, before that, Dr. No has her tied up on an incline and is waiting to slowly flood her and I guess drown her to death. It's like
I think the original
it's
idea
like the unnecessarily slow dipping mechanism from Austin Powers.
Well, I think it was much like in the Goonies. It's the sexual torture devices. There's a room and there was supposed to be something with crabs or like sea bass.
Sea bass. What?
Or something.
They're gonna like peck her to death slowly.
I don't know. There was gonna be like
nibble
crab
her.
or something coming.
Maybe they'll chew on the dead skin on her calluses like they do in some of those beauty shops that you can go to, and they'll give her a really nice manicure and a facial. So they get into a boat, and Felix is there to rescue them, and we're all making love in the back of a boat. He unties it. He's like, "No, Felix, I need to get my jollies out first."
Mm-hmm. One of the few ones where it doesn't end with James Bond will return in whatever.
Well, because they didn't know because they were testing.
They didn't know.
It began and also Under the Mango Tree, which is I think it's a great song. I love that song. It's not a James Bond song.
Ding, ding. Yes,
but it's a fun. This is a very fun kind of compact, lean, economical story, and it has the beginning, middle, and conclusion. It just doesn't have the beats that we're used to. The beats of a James Bond movie start to really come into play, I guess, maybe with For Much of the Love, because we get the prologue first before the titles. Remember?
Yeah, we get a prologue. We have Q. We have all these things. It doesn't really fully gel until Goldfinger, and then Goldfinger isn't even. It's not my favorite because when you really pick apart the plot, like none of it makes sense. And, and Bond's kind of stupid and doesn't really do much.
And we'll get to that with Freilich because Freilich is a fan of Goldfinger.
Look,
Goldfinger's a fine movie. It's a classic. It's one I remember when I was a kid.
That's style over substance, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so I guess we're at the critique and review. Not that you haven't been doing that already, but we're at
Sorry.
the critique and review point of the structure. If there's anything else we want to say about liking relative liking.
I
of this
enjoyed
movie.
it for the possibilities that it could offer. It was well made. Ken Adams is wonderful. Unfortunately, he was invited back to From Russia with Love, but he couldn't do it because Stanley Kubrick saw Dr. No and said, "I've got to have him designing my War Room set for Doctor Strangelove."
Mm-hmm.
So he was off of that movie, which is kind of makes sense because most of the action of From Russia with Love takes place on a train, so there's really not much to design. But the set is wonderful for what it is, for the money that they had, which they, as it turned out later Bond movies, more money was being spent on production design. So they just went absolutely incredible with, I want to say, for Ken Adam, his top sets were You Only Live Twice and The Spy Who Loved Me are the most impressive sets that he designed. They were so massive and all-encompassing.
Also, we got not to mention Morris Bender with
the Bond
titles.
Yeah, and with co-designer Terry Bond, I believe is his name. His name is Bond. I know that.
Well, I know there's a Samantha Bond played.
And then Samantha Bond played a
Plays
Moneypenny
Moneypenny
in what the
Brosnan
Dalton
ones.
Brosnan movie.
But what a lot of people might not know is the next two movies, the opening credits, including Goldfinger, which is iconic. Not Morris Bender. They were Robert Brownjohn, I believe, did the opening credits for those two because
Right.
Morris was not available.
Well,
And then
the opening credits would, again, with every Bond movie, they just go more elaborate, more over the top. So we had dancing animated forms in this movie, and then we had shaking bazooms and butts and From Russia with Love, and then we would get into even more.
Oh yeah.
It would get even more elaborate.
So you get into the 70s with the Roger Moores, and it's full on. It's full on nudity.
It's full on. Just we're riding naked girls riding guns. What did you think of it, honey?
Yeah, so I think that if I saw this in isolation, I was just watching a spy thriller from the 60s, I would judge it on its own merit, and I would like it. It's entertaining, and I like the fact that it's a little bit slower pace than the other one, which is a good thing in a way, because sometimes when you're watching these, I feel like there aren't these really big action scenes in this one, not as many. There aren't so many things getting destroyed, so it has a different and more chilled out pace, which I really appreciate. And also, I really I like the girl. I like Ursula Andress. I understand she's not a great actress. I just have special affection for her because she was in one of my favorite movies as a kid, which was The Clash of the Titans.
Oh, that's right.
Yay!
She was Aphrodite, so she'll always.
She looked great in that because they put some sort of weird thing on the camera and filtered her to hell. I remember it's like all and make Laurence Olivier everybody looked all shiny and weird.
Yeah, that's true. They made him glow because they were gods and goddesses.
Also, we have to mention that Ursula Andress was also in Casino Royale.
Yes. Yeah.
The 1967 version, of course.
Oh no, we have to watch that one. Oh no.
It's funny because we watched a movie today with Barbara Boucher in it. Barbara Boucher was Moneypenny in Casino Royale. It was another spy thriller. It was called Agent for Harm, and it was really terrible. It was like one of the worst spy. That's the thing about Dr. No. It was enormously influential. It single-handedly started the spy genre. It started the spy thriller genre.
Is there anything else we want to say about the cast
Oh,
that
David.
we didn't cover?
David.
Oh yeah, Dave. What did you think of the movie?
It's funny because I had started to go through them in October, and because it was gonna time out to how often I was watching them. It was gonna time out to when the new one was supposed to come out in April, and it was all gonna come together hopefully. But then of course movie theaters started to close. They bumped it to November, so I was like I just stopped. I stopped like right in the middle of Brosnan's.
Mm-hmm.
And then you brought this up, so I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm starting over again. So I'll start with these, and hopefully I'll be able to crank through them, and we'll get to it again. If it comes out in November, hopefully it'll come out. I watch this. I pretty much didn't mess with my phone because that's usually what I do while I watch everything. So I didn't want to because I wanted to focus on what I was watching, and I started to notice like more details. I'm like, this is really good, and not only that, these Blu-rays. And I recommend anybody get these Blu-rays, although maybe wait till the 4K if that ever comes out. But man, these Blu-rays from the mid-2000s, they look good. Like they look sharp and clear. They fixed the sound. The sound is remixed into like 5.1 surround sound.
It's wonderful. I did have I wanted to get to my issue with the aspect ratio because I thought 178:1 was kind of a bizarre aspect ratio to start from because it's not quite VistaVision and it's not quite full frame.
No. It's one. Here's what it is. Okay, your TV now, the high def TV you have now, that is 178:1. What you're watching is they pillar box it where it's a little bit black on, instead of black on the top and bottom for widescreen, it's a little black on the sides. It's a 1.66:1 ratio of the European ratio, and that's how it was shot. Now I used to have the DVD, and that filled up the screen. You know, you could watch it 166, you could watch it 178, you could watch it 185. It was kind of framed to be shown in any format, even like 133. If you watch it on TV, you wouldn't miss much. But that's the.
Well, did you notice though on your screen? Because I noticed this on my screen, the outer edges of the frame tend to bend a little bit. Did you notice that there's a little bit of bending in some of these shots that you can see?
On the black bar, or on the.
It's like right at the edge, right at the edges of.
That might be a TV thing. I'd have to go.
No, it's definitely not. It looked like.
No, I got full black on the side, no bending, no nothing.
I've only noticed this with, like the smaller aspect ratios, that there tends to be a little bit, but for some movies that are shot with a certain process, and I know this was shot with a Mitchell BNCR. Camera from the late 50s, early 60s, there is some bend. You're going to see a little bit of a fold in the negative, or in the print actually.
Well, also
in some ways,
like the lenses they
you don't
use.
see them in every shot. I think it's a lens thing. I think if they are using a certain lens,
spherical lenses,
it could use, like if you're using like a 27 millimeter lens or something, you're going to get this weird folding effect at the edges. I don't know quite what it is. I'll try to make note of it for next time, because I know it occurs in From Russia with Love in a couple of shots, but I'll make a note of it. All right.
But yes, I did like it. I actually liked it. I every time I watch these, I get a little bit more out of them. Although I will say, I started to really enjoy the Roger Moore ones. The more I've watched them.
Yeah, Roger Moore's
because
my
I
guy.
appreciate the stupidity of the thing. They're not necessarily even good movies, but damn if they aren't entertaining, because you just Sir Roger raises an eyebrow.
He's kind of fun. He's like fun. He's not
He's
as
fun.
Connery is brutal. Moore was fun. Lazenby was kind of too human. I think that was my main issue with Lazenby, is that they humanized James Bond. And then after that, Dalton is kind of like an animal. He's like a brutal animal. And then Brosnan kind of goes back to Moore with the kind of charming, funny pun stuff. And then Craig is kind of scary. I find Craig to be kind of scary.
Well, that's the point, especially if you see he's like you don't want to walk into this guy in a dark alley.
No. I wouldn't want to walk into any of these guys, except maybe Lazenby. I have a feeling he would offer me a hot beverage and maybe some baked bread. That's it. Would you like some baked bread? Okay, so where are we now?
So, any other notes or any comments we want to make about the cast that we didn't already? We basically did. Everyone said what they thought about Connery, and
well, it's the first appearance of Bernard Lee as M.
Right.
And Lois Maxwell.
Who
would continue with the franchise until A View to a Kill. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Moneypenny always has these watercolors of flowers behind her, and they keep those same pictures all the way up until even the Moore ones. You see them behind her. I don't know. It cracks me up because that's really some very consistent set decorating right there.
Daylights too, probably, and probably even Brosnan. They probably have that room off to the side. It's like everything.
Yeah, I might have seen them in the Dalton woods. I think you're right. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, I just realized something. It's kind of has to do with the set. Isn't that kind of the beginning of when Bond goes to the office, but he's got like this is when you feel like you're home. He's got those double doors where he's got like the big padded door and it goes into M's office, and then M has his own sort of padded door, and then that opens and closes. Yeah. And if you notice at the end of Skyfall, spoiler, when he goes into M's office, it's the double doors. It's the double padded door, and you're like, oh yes, we're here.
The same thing. Yeah. They took.
We're home. Yes.
Yeah. That's why Skyfall it's very high up on my list, because I felt it was the first proper Craig Bond film, even though I really did enjoy Quantum of Solace. But
so there's one more cast person I just wanted to mention, which was I hope I'm saying his name right, John Kitzmiller as Quarrel. He was my favorite side character in this, and he's from Battle Creek, Michigan.
Oh, he is?
Yeah.
Oh, he's a Michigan boy. How about that?
And don't forget, there's Quarrel Jr. in Live and Let Die.
That's right. Yeah. There was another Quarrel in Live and Let Die. I think he lives. He lives in that one, though, right?
He lives. He doesn't. Yeah. That's good.
A lot of fun. This one was, and it was really fun discussing it too. What do you say, huh? Did we do good? I mean, I know I screwed up a little bit with the audio, but hey.
It was great, yeah. So we have another section here, but I think you guys pretty much went into it. But do you want to talk about music any further?
Well, Monty Norman did the theme, and he is the one. He doesn't often get credit for the Bond music because they always tend to credit John Barry, but John Barry just sort of takes his theme.
I mean, people have been they've been sued and countersued about like who was, and eventually Monty Norman has like the full credit of writing the James Bond theme.
Yeah,
but he basically came in and wrote a few pieces of music, and then they gave it to John Barry to orchestrate everything, and like it's like you could like they've said like John Barry kind of wrote half of it, and Monty Norman wrote half of it, but they kind of gave Monty Norman the whole credit because they just had to do with the contract that they signed or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so
they kind of Lennon McCartney'd it.
Yeah.
But everybody gets paid, so everybody had a good time.
Yeah.
Watching all these movies, I now know John Barry more than I ever thought I did, because I remember he did the music for King Kong, the 1976 version, which is my favorite, and I listened to that music, and it sounds like it has tinges of Bond in it, you know?
Oh yeah, there is a John Barry sound that you hear it, about strings and like a lot about strings, and you know, because he started as like a jazz musician.
Yeah, well, they all did. You know, Johnny Williams started as a jazz musician. Remember?
That's true.
Johnny Williams, baby.
Opening titles? Is there? You talked about that a little bit.
We talked about that. Yeah, I was just basically, you know, they were definitely going for a vibe. I think the movie was successful because it did break a lot of taboos, and it also put a lot of male flesh, Connerys, on display. So you had two audiences that were going to this movie for two very different reasons. One was to see Connery, and the other was to see the girls. Oh, and then you'd get a third audience that loves action movies. So it was
spy movies were big.
And it was a spy movie. It was subversive. It created the genre. And then you also had the kids. You could actually take the kids to the movies back then because they didn't have a rating system yet.
Speaking of action, I mean, this is kind of like, you know, you dig into the supplementaries. I mean, this is edited by Peter Hunt, who would go on to direct On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yeah, and he directed a favorite Charles Bronson movie of mine called Death Hunt that I love.
It was his editing style that kind of created, like, it was. If I remember correctly, he said something about this was one of the first movies where they would cut on a movement.
Yeah.
Like be sort of mid-movement, and then the cut would happen, whereas they said that was breaking the rule right there.
There is a definite flow. There's a really good flow to the action too, not just just standing and doing your dialogue thing, but the action. And John Glenn was Peter Hunt's assistant and would then graduate to becoming editor and then director. One of the more popular directors. He directed through the Moore and Dalton years, right?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. Well, the box office is, you know, it was
now are
$1
these
million
numbers
movie, right?
Yeah, we have to kind of figure out, like, okay, what was the first release, and then what was the re-release? Because, like, do they add up all those re-releases, or do they add up that first?
No. The numbers don't go there. They only go with the full amount of whatever it made.
Oh, okay.
At the time, at least that I can see from the numbers, which I don't have access to. Can you hit?
I mean, it was literally re-released like 5 or 6 times, because every time a new movie would come out, they'd re-release them, and they'd be these double features.
On a $1 million budget, the domestic gross was 16.
Let's call it 60 million.
Huh?
Well, it says worldwide box office 60.
Oh, 59,567. Yeah.
Well,
so it made 60. It made $60 million, which is almost 60 times its budget. So it was enormously profitable. And this was $1962, and the average movie ticket cost was roughly 75 cents. I want to say.
And milk was a nickel.
Yeah.
And they estimated some 150 million people saw this movie.
Yeah, they should go by like ticket number sales, really, like the ticket numbers. But again, that seems a tad high. That just seems like it's re-release after re-release added together. That's
It might be. And I was told also that the movie was held over in release for months after its.
Oh yeah, and also remember, this was in the early days of when they were making them. They were cranking these things out once a year. They did that for the first 4 were cranked out one a year. So they were almost going into the next one almost immediately. They were probably already starting to film it like in early, for Much Ado About Love, probably like early '63. Like, oh, we got a hit. They'd already planned it out probably.
Yeah, they struck while the iron was hot.
Thanks for listening. Next week, we will talk about From Russia with Love and what it has in common with Jaws. Until then, stay away from the drugged coffee.
Good night.
All right, that's it.
Say good night.
Good night.
Good night.
No, no.